This video describes the best of many canoe trips done in Eastern Ontario from 2021 to 2023. About 2,500 kilometers were paddled. Most trips were on gently flowing rivers or lakes. Details show how you can do the trips too. A typical paddle covered 15 to 20 kilometers of flat water each day. Driving times were a few minutes to 3 hours or more in each direction. Driving times and paddling distances are approximate only. I live in Barrhaven, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I use a regular car without four-wheel drive. I saw rapids but usually did not paddle rapids or whitewater. A few exceptions are clearly noted. Many access points are unsuitable for motorboats. You can find a map showing all of our water access points in the description below. Locations are presented in geographical order and not the order they were paddled. The locations from the 2020 YouTube video, Paddling Day Trips Near Ottawa, do not occur again. A link to that video is in the description below. Each location is ranked. 4 stars means an exceptional trip, the very best. 3 stars means a highly recommended trip. 2 stars means a good trip, worth repeating. 1 star means the trip was not a favorite. There might be something wrong with it. 2021, 2022, and 2023. Some context. Early in 2021 saw the first vaccine for COVID-19, and in April and May, a shutdown of most water access in Ottawa. The end of May, rules relaxed, water became accessible, and we started overnight canoe tripping again. In 2022, many trips were done to new places, a distance from Ottawa. I was able to lead many trips with appreciative people of all ages from all over the world. 2023 was a year of expanding horizons. Most of the usual short canoe trips in Eastern Ontario had been done. I looked for water I hadn't paddled. I consulted experts. Dams and rapids had not blocked my progress, but now they stopped me in many places. I experienced impassable portages, wildfire smoke, and heat illness. I learned to paddle first upstream and then downstream to spot potential dangers safely, and I dabbled in whitewater. Many lessons were learned when something went wrong. Many trips were altered to keep people safe. I have lost and found my wallet and my wedding ring on trips. I have had my only water filtration system and stove not work. I have forgotten my PFD, my paddle, and my equipment required by law. I've portaged with many loose items, and I've tried to find a portage while carrying a canoe. I've left parts of my first aid kit at home, and I've needed them. CAA has rescued my car. In case it is helpful, a lessons learned link is in the description below. I encourage you to read it. I've compiled additional resources with driving times, distances paddled, fees, parking details, and warnings for each location. A link is in the description. You should do your own research before going on any paddling trip. Water levels, weather, fees, and conditions will change. Materials are out of date before they are posted. Although I've aimed for accuracy, there are undoubtedly errors. You are always responsible for your own safety. A few of these were solo trips, but most were group trips with up to 8 people. A few of the trip participants can be seen here. And there were many others. The following locations are part of the Rideau River system. The Jock River at Richmond. We paddled the Jock River upstream from Terry Carise Park at the end of April. We used a sturdy canoe because we were unsure what we might find. In one place, the river was blocked by fallen trees, but we found a way to paddle through them. There was current and some shallow spots. Water levels will determine how far you can paddle. We spotted a barred owl, a woodpecker, and lots of trilliums along the Jock River. Friendly locals told us that some properties in Richmond go to the waterline. We ate lunch at the Richmond Conservation Area. We continued to Brown's Natural Area, where we were stopped by rapids. This is where the annual Jock River race ends. We returned the way we had come, covering 18 kilometers in all. There is a busy road along much of the route. A lost wallet and keys were quickly found by searching through all of the gear bags. Disaster averted. The best time of year for this location is just after spring flooding. It is a good paddle. Burritts Rapids and east. 4 of us paddled east from Burritts Rapids in May. We hoped to reach Libby Island before turning around, but we didn't get there. We had 2 solo paddlers along. Instead of low winds, we had winds of 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. When paddling into a strong wind, it helped to put more weight near the front of the canoe. When paddling with a strong tailwind, it helped to put more weight near the back of the canoe. One of the kayak paddles cracked, so an extra was used. It's good to have an extra paddle. We saw lots of turtles, herons, geese, and an osprey. About 5 kilometers east of Burritts, we reached the Catchall area, which was shallow with lots of cattails and other vegetation. The vegetation made it hard to paddle, but these shallow, weedy spots had large fish swimming in circles like a crazy tornado. They flipped out of the water and banged loudly against our canoes. We called them flipping fish, and they were the most exciting part of this trip. Locals told us they were mating carp. Otter Lake. In early May, 2 of us paddled from the Otter Lake public boat launch on Highway 15. We paddled 20 kilometers clockwise around the lake on a cool, cloudy, windy day with a chance of rain. Large waves and whitecaps made paddling challenging. A campground was preparing to open. At the south end of the lake, there was a conservation area, but most of the rest of the lake had cottages. Thankfully, the wind died near the end. We saw Camp Otterdale and spotted Elephant Island. Then it started to rain. This is not a lake we would paddle again. Otty Lake. We arrived early and parked 2 cars at the Miller Bay public boat ramp, where there is often a parking shortage. 9 of us paddled Otty Lake's shoreline clockwise. We stopped at one of several beautiful Crown Land islands for lunch. The swimming looked good, but it was a cool day. The lake had a reasonable number of cottages. They did not cover all of the shoreline. There were places that felt wild. On Otty Lake, we saw an unconcerned deer, turtles, loons, a heron, cardinal flowers, and interesting rock faces. We paddled about 20 kilometers of the 35-kilometer lake perimeter. We did not go up Jebb's Creek. It connects to the Tay River, and it can be paddled each spring. We've heard it has lots of wildlife and some beaver dams. We made it off of the water a few minutes before an expected storm. We had 2 locals providing wonderful on-water guidance. This was an unusual trip because we had 9 people on the trip and 8 more on a waiting list. It was a good paddle, and we would go again if we could get parked. Pike Lake. 2 of us arrived early at the County Road 10 public launch for Pike Lake. The launch is near a dam, so watch for current. We paddled south and upstream on Grants Creek into Pike Lake, a long, narrow lake. We paddled the shoreline clockwise through some islands. Most areas had many cottages. The southeastern shore had fewer cottages and a nice wetland area leading to another section of Grants Creek. It looked interesting. About halfway up the western shoreline, we stopped to explore Johnny's Island, but a swarm of black flies chased us back onto the water. There was a small trailer park on the west side. This was a pleasant 20-kilometer paddle on a perfect day. There was nothing wrong with this trip. The Tay River from Perth to Glen Tay. In early spring, we paddled from the west end of Mill Street in Perth, upstream on the Tay River as far as Glen Tay. We spotted a golf course and did a short, easy portage around a small dam. We saw lots of beaver lodges and a few baby beavers. There were Canada geese, mallard ducks, red-winged blackbirds. Just before reaching the Glen Road Bridge, we were stopped by rapids. Both sides of the river had private property at the rapids. We could not get to the Glen swimming area and picnic spot, so we had our lunches on the river and paddled back, a total distance of about 14 kilometers. There was nothing wrong with this route. Grants Creek. Several times in early spring, we paddled upstream from Last Dual Park in Perth on the Tay River. We portaged about 150 meters around rapids in Perth. When there was a fork in the Tay River, we headed left for Grants Creek. We found a wetland maze with lots of cattails, dogwood, beaver lodges, and dams. We paddled where we could find water. We saw a deer, baby and adult beavers, Canada geese, mallard ducks, and a swimming northern water snake. After 8 kilometers upstream, we enjoyed lunch at the beautiful John Miller Park. We paddled upstream a little farther until rapids made us return the way we had come. This paddle is recommended when water levels are very high each spring. After water levels have receded, a lack of water will prohibit your progress. This was a good 16-kilometer paddling route. Using a whitewater canoe and whitewater skills, one could portage from John Miller Park to the Glen picnic area and paddle the Tay River back to Perth, but we did not do this. Long Lake, Elm Grove. On a damp day in late October, we drove to 525 Long Lake Road, the Rideau Valley Conservation access point for canoes and kayaks. 2 of us paddled the small lake. We explored the 5 islands in the lake, the largest being Ferry Island. We found a couple of nice Ministry of Natural Resources places for picnics on the small islands. Camping is not permitted. One could fish or swim. There were geese and ducks. We saw a tamarack losing its needles, and lots of oak trees. All of the leaves had fallen from the trees except the oak trees. We saw the mica mines conservation area at the south end. We did not explore the creek into the lake on the east side because it started raining. There was nothing wrong with this short paddle. Parking is limited. Newboro Lake to Bedford Mills. 2 of us parked at the Newboro Municipal Launch. This is the highest point on the Rideau River system. We followed the western shoreline south toward Bedford Mills. There were many places that water lilies and cattails were thick. We saw 4 deer, loons, and mergansers. We liked the scenery on Loon Lake. We paddled under the County Road 10 bridge, past the portage to Devil Lake, and to the old Bedford Mill. We saw the rapids coming from Devil Lake. There is good hiking here. There is a nice launch on County Road 10 nearby. We returned by paddling up the east side of Loon Lake and along the east side of many Newboro islands. The wind was still low, but it caused significant waves on Newboro Lake. The Newboro Lock Station was closed and empty. The whole area was beautiful. We paddled about 24 kilometers. This was a good paddle on a calm day. Launches here can be busy in the summer. Opinicon Lake and Indian Lake. 2 of us paddled in solo boats counterclockwise around the shoreline of Opinicon Lake on a beautiful calm day. The distance was about 24 kilometers. We saw the Queen's University Biological Station. We saw 8 trumpeter swans, an eagle, loons, herons, Canada geese, and ducks. The highlight was when 3 trumpeter swans did a fly past just over our heads. You could hear the wind from their wings. It was amazing. We camped comfortably at Chaffee's Lock Station, and we explored Indian Lake as well. Highly recommended. Sand Lake. 2 of us launched from a lock station and paddled tandem around the lake, about 16 kilometers. There are many access points. The north end of the lake had fewer cottages and looked wilder. This was a beautiful lake for swimming and paddling. We saw Sand Lake Park. We spotted one large black rat snake with a group of baby snakes at Davis Lock Station. We renamed the White Rock Island the Cliffs of Dover in honor of British Captain Peacock. This lake is highly recommended. Seeley's Bay to Morton Bay, or the reverse. We paddled Morton Bay, Whitefish Lake, and Little Cranberry Lake on the Rideau many times. There are two large granite rocks on the east side of Morton Bay called Rock Dunder and Dunder's Mate. We hiked to the top of Rock Dunder to see the beautiful views. It is possible to hike Rock Dunder beginning from paddling on Morton Bay if you arrive with your permit from the Rideau Waterway Land Trust. In Morton Bay itself, we found herons, loons, a swimming rock, a cave, and a portage into Dean's Pond. Just beyond the bay, we watched the ospreys and many other birds at Kate's Island Nature Reserve. On Whitefish Lake, we saw swans and regular flotillas of yachts. Some large boats tried to hurry us through Murphy's Narrows. We came into Little Cranberry Lake and found Haskins Point to be a wonderful lunch spot. It had a canoe garden and good swimming. A ferry used to cross the Rideau here. A stowaway Coca-Cola polar bear appeared out from a barrel and led our return voyage. The locals were very friendly now. This is a beautiful place to paddle, and there is a lot of history here. It is highly recommended. Upper Brewers Locks to Seeley's Bay. Early September, two of us did a one-way exploratory 15-kilometer paddle from Upper Brewers Locks to Seeley's Bay. We parked a shuttle car at Centennial Park in Seeley's Bay. We drove to Upper Brewers Locks and paddled north. In the channel north of Upper Brewers, we saw the Duke's Profile, a rock that looks like a face. We spotted loons, herons, and two large swans. One swan was white and one was gray and fluffy. We would later learn that a family of swans could have some white and some gray babies. This was our first large gray swan. We paddled through Cranberry Lake and under the Brass Point Bridge, which can swing open for larger boats. We paddled into Little Cranberry Lake, past Haskins Point, and turned right into the channel to the picturesque town of Seeley's Bay. A cheerful local welcomed tourists at the launch. This was a good scenic paddle. Upper Brewers Locks to Kingston Mills. This trip started when we removed our canoe from under a cottage where we had placed it during a tornado watch. Our planned group trip was cancelled due to thunderstorm risk. Instead, two of us paddled south from Upper Brewers Locks very early. We portaged through Lower Brewers Locks under construction. Because it was early, we saw lots of wildlife. We saw swans and baby swans, herons, a deer, a baby deer, an osprey, and a beaver. We saw more than 40 swans on River Styx. This is the place if you want to see swans. Local fishermen said they had seen a turtle with a head the size of a football that day. River Styx and By Lake are very wide and could have hazardous waves. The motorboat drivers were asleep and the wind was calm, so we had no problems. By lunchtime, after 22 kilometers, we reached Rideau Acres Campground, where we had parked our shuttle car. No rain or thunderstorm had happened yet. You could camp at Rideau Acres Campground and do this trip. It's a good trip on a calm day. The following places are on the Gananoque River system. Morton Creek to Lower Beverley Lake. 4 of us unloaded our gear at the Highway 15 launch into Morton Creek before parking at the Morton Community Hall on the corner of Judd and Stewart Street. A local welcomed us and answered our questions. This paddle was an adventure because some locals had told us it couldn't be done, while one expert assured us that it could be done. There were lots of plants and wildlife. We found maple, oak, and sumac beside the creek. There was some vegetation, but it did not block our way in early July. An invasive flowering rush was amongst the plants. The creek got wider as we headed towards lower Beverley Lake. We heard a cuckoo bird, which is rare, as well as seeing herons, red-winged blackbirds, and turkey vultures. There were cows at the edge of the river, reminding us that we were paddling through farms. On lower Beverley Lake, we found a nature conservancy with an osprey nest, one of several on the lake. We stopped to see the canoe shook, which honors paddlers who have gone before us. We followed the southern shoreline to Blue Heron Point, where we found another heron. On a nearby eagle platform to honor eagleman Charles Broley, we found an eagle. His research determined that the chemical DDT was killing the eagles. We finished up our beautiful hot 15-kilometer paddle with ice cream and a swim at Kendrick's Park, where we'd parked our shuttle vehicle. The beach here can sometimes accumulate goose poop, but we had no problems. Highly recommended. Red Horse Lake. Some access points for Red Horse Lake require lengthy paddles. Singleton Lake Family Campground allows access for a fee. Lyndhurst has a town launch on Ford Street. The first time we came here, we chose a private lodge on Gananoque Lake. Our goal was to explore the ancient portage from Red Horse Lake into Charleston Lake, which has documented use over thousands of years. After the Rideau system was built, the portage was no longer popular. We hoped we could find the portage location, but we expected it to be overgrown. Between Gananoque Lake and Red Horse Lake, we found beautiful rock formations, part of the Lost Bay Nature Reserve. We saw Pitch Pine Point, which was named for one of the last pitch pine trees in the area. We needed to watch for rock shelves just under the water surface. This was a very pretty part of our trip. We paddled past an old mica chimney stack and under a bridge at Black Rapids, where there were no rapids. We went past Shawmere Cottages on Red Horse Lake, which only allows access for their own cottagers. We found Red Horse Cliff on the east side, halfway up Red Horse Lake. We could not see the original Red Horse painting, for which the lake was named, but we found a red horse someone painted in 2019. We found our portage on the east side. To our surprise, it was both signed and maintained thanks to Charleston Lake Provincial Park. Be aware of poison ivy here. We ate our lunches and we walked to Charleston Lake. Camping is not permitted. The Charleston Lake side of the portage was only signed with a small blank sign. We returned the way we had come. In the rain, we saw terns repetitively dive-bombing a loon and a baby loon. The loons kept going underwater. Red Horse Lake has only a few cottages. The north shore is mostly Crown land. We paddled about 20 kilometers, but we came back to explore more later. This is highly recommended. Before the Rideau Canal was built in the 1830s, the main way to get from the St. Lawrence River to the Ottawa River was along the Gananoque River. In the 1880s, there was a plan to build two locks where the Morton Dam is today and connect the Rideau River system to Gananoque on the St. Lawrence. The locks did not happen, but capable canoeists can avoid dams at Morton, Lyndhurst, and Marble Rock and explore parts of the historic route. The Gananoque River Historic Route. This is not a current paddling route. The unsanctioned portage on the west side at Marble Rock Dam is dangerous. The east side is private property now. Do not trespass. I do not assume any liability for personal or property injury or damages that paddlers may encounter here. Paddlers here do so entirely at their own risk. The historic route through Wiltsey Creek to Charleston Lake is also not an easy route now. Nonetheless, 4 of us departed from Griffin's cottages on Gananoque Lake. Water levels were low in early July. Paddling here was best early in the season, before vegetation blocked the route. It was calm, rainy, and the air was hazy with wildfire smoke. We headed to the right and stayed with the open water. We saw Wiltsey Creek wetlands and many cattails on our left. Plants on the water did not slow our progress. There were quite a few full-sized white swans and both gray and white baby swans. Some were identified as mute swans. We saw a deer, a beaver, and many herons. We found the Marble Rock Dam, an unsanctioned portage on the west side. It was blocked by construction material. The area was not safe. Looking at the sketchy takeout, Lynn declared her risk management policy said the other canoe had to go first. We did. We climbed over a pile of metal slowly and carefully. We avoided poison ivy when we put the canoe back into the Gananoque River. The second canoe followed. We left some families fishing while standing in poison ivy. We paddled on to the Maple Grove launch near Gananoque, where we had left a shuttle vehicle. We'd covered 15 kilometers on a one-way adventure. One could paddle another 5 kilometers to the Gananoque River Street launch, but we didn't. Those wanting to get to the St. Lawrence must do an additional portage around another dam in town. We had a visit to the excellent Thousand Islands Museum. This area had good paddling early in the season, if you avoid the dangerous Marble Rock Dam. Gould Lake Conservation Area. Gould Lake is part of the Cataraqui River system. Here, I learned you get up early if you want to see wildlife. I drove to Gould and saw 4 deer and a beaver, in addition to 2 giant snapping turtles. The area had good swimming, but the day was cloudy and damp. At 7:30 in the morning, I paddled solo around Gould Lake, hoping the wind would remain low. The perimeter of the lake is about 10 kilometers. Though the photos do not look outstanding, I thought this place had great potential for people wanting a short paddle. The terrain is rugged with lots of rock formations. There is good swimming and hiking, but there is no camping. Trees include eastern hemlock, pines, maples, and oaks. Coyotes can be seen here, but I didn't spot one. At 10:30 in the morning, I returned to the launch, and I found 2 busloads of school children dressed like voyageurs. They had painted beards and mustaches. They thought I must be a real voyageur, and they asked me many questions. It rained for the rest of the day, so I had enjoyed the best of the day. A highly recommended short paddle. Visit when it is likely to be quiet. Depot Lakes Conservation Area. We spent a few days at Depot Lakes Conservation Area, part of the headwaters of the Napanee River system. We had a good waterfront backcountry campsite with lots of space and an outhouse. We paddled around Second Depot Lake several times. Most campsites were empty due to recent rain. We saw beaver lodges, loons, a deer, and a pretty waterfall on the west side. We saw hiking trails and a beautiful sunset. Twice we drove to Third Depot Lake. The first time the road was rough. The second time, a year later, the road was difficult for us to drive because they had added very large rocks instead of gravel. Our tires did not like to go up the hills on those rocks. Third Depot Lake is very beautiful. It has lots of rock formations and cliffs. We paddled towards Fourth Depot Lake, and we saw the train track responsible for the sounds that we had heard while camping. It is possible to portage into Third Depot Lake to avoid the poor road, but we did not do so. All of the lakes were fairly small, and the portages fairly short. Camping had some restrictions, a short season, and it was comparatively expensive. The conservation area itself is open year-round and is highly recommended. A fee and permit were required to visit. Off-season, you may need to call ahead to obtain your permit. The following places are in the Frontenac area. Eagle Lake. I arrived early at Eagle Lake, starting at the beautiful public dock and beach at the south end of the lake. I met some bikers and shared a few supplies that they needed. I had canoed on this lake as a child, and I wondered what I would find 50 years later. It was a very calm day, and I paddled solo heading north along the eastern shoreline. There were some cottages on the lake, but some parts of the lake looked natural. I saw several turtles, 2 adult loons, and 2 babies. I floated amongst the loons for quite a while, and I took their photos. I spoke to several others who were swimming with the loons. The loons did not seem to mind the company. I returned to the launch for my lunch after paddling about 10 kilometers. It was a good trip. Big Salmon Lake, Frontenac Provincial Park. We had packed for a camping trip on Big Salmon Lake, but the gravel road caused our brakes to make serious noises when we arrived at Big Salmon Lake. We decided to explore the lake and then head home to get our car repaired. We checked our campsite and it was really good. There was a lot of wildlife. We saw a deer that watched us while we watched it. We saw a beaver and a turtle sunning itself. There were irises growing wild and several rock walls. The wind remained low and the lake was beautiful. It was an enjoyable 15-kilometer paddle. The lake had no cottages, but quite a few campsites in clusters. The gravel found in our brakes was easily fixed afterward. This trip is highly recommended. Kingsford and Birch Lakes in Frontenac Provincial Park. We arrived at the Kingsford Dam parking area early in mid-April. We had previously camped here. The Devil Lake road sign was missing, so we were glad we arrived with excellent directions. Last time we had got lost. Park staff could not tell us if there was ice on the lake. It was sunny and 25 degrees Celsius, but the water was icy cold. The winds were low. The west side of Kingsford Lake had some cottages, while the east side had none and is part of Frontenac Provincial Park. We paddled south along the west shore of Kingsford Lake, through a narrow section between the lakes with cottages, and then down the west shore of Birch Lake into Mitchell Creek. You could paddle farther into Mitchell Creek if you wanted to. We paddled up the east side of Birch Lake and Kingsford Lake to go back. The campsites we passed looked good. We found no ice on the lake. We met 2 hikers who had been swimming, and they were sunbathing. Brrr. We saw 6 beavers, but one did not like where we ate our lunch. It kept slapping its tail on the water until we left. There were Canada geese, mallard ducks, red-winged blackbirds, and a loon. Near Dipper Bay, we saw marble rocks before returning to the launch. We watched for an eagle, which is sometimes seen on Kingsford Lake, but we did not spot one. Later in the year, poison ivy grows here. We paddled about 15 kilometers. It was a good paddling location. Wolfe Lake, Frontenac. We parked on Wolfe Lake Road beside the Evergreen Golf Course. We paddled counterclockwise around the lake about 26 kilometers. The first section had quite a few cottages, but the northwest section of the lake was wild. We saw a few motorboats. We saw a groundhog, geese, and water lilies. We saw Bluff Point, a high rock cliff. Near Camp Iowa, we saw many turtles. There were 7 loons together in one spot, and in several other places we saw a loon with at least 1 baby. This seemed like more loons than we'd seen other places. We returned to the launch to find that there was very little parking left. It was a good paddling location. Canoe Lake in Frontenac. There is a small, free public access point at the south end of the lake on James Wilson Road. We paid to park at the Canoe Lake campground. 3 of us paddled the shoreline clockwise, about 20 kilometers in all. There were a few cottages on the lake, mostly near our starting spot. In many places, the side of the lake was steep. The southwest part of the lake had the most interesting rock cliffs. We saw loons, turtles, fish, cardinal flowers, swamp milkweed, and lots of smartweed pink flowers. We saw sumac, oak, maple, birch, and poplar trees. This was a nice, quiet, long, narrow lake on a day with low wind. It was a good trip. Kennebec Lake. There is a public launch into Kennebec Lake at 1250 Henderson Road. There is also a nearby good public beach on the west side. It doesn't have much parking, but arrival by boat works. This part of the lake has many homes and cottages and is busy. We launched from a private location and we paddled counterclockwise. It is possible to paddle Beaver Creek on the north side of Kennebec Lake, west of Henderson Road, but we did not do so. The northwest section of the lake is quieter, with crownland islands, large rock cliffs, and a crownland beach. On the south side, we paddled into a large bay that led us to the Salmon River, and some rapids where we turned around. We saw beaver lodges. Often wildlife can be seen here. There was nothing wrong with this paddling location. The Salmon River from Highway 7 to Bull Lake. Caution! This route had an unmarked, unmaintained, difficult portage with a cliff to avoid rapids. 4 of us met at the Highway 7 Salmon River public access point to explore an old Salmon River route. In September, the Salmon River had a bit of current. Several sections of the narrow river were very pretty, and one part looked mysterious. We saw the bridge for Elm Tree Road. Sometimes low water levels are a problem, but thankfully a local had scouted it for us. We knew we were approaching rapids, and we looked for an old portage just before the rapids. There were steep, slippery, muddy banks with poison ivy. Eventually a path was found that led to a bridge. We needed 4 people and teamwork to lower our canoes down a cliff to a nice put-in below the rapids. The river opened up into Buck Lake, where we ate lunch. We paddled through a narrow passage between Buck Lake and Bull Lake. The west side of Bull Lake had cottages or homes, while the east side looked wild. We found the Bull Lake Road public launch where we could have left a shuttle vehicle, but we hadn't. It had space for a picnic and a swim, but very little parking. From there, we paddled east through a very pretty post office bay and into Horseshoe Lake to a house where we'd left our shuttle vehicle. Horseshoe Lake had lots of cottages. We had paddled about 20 kilometers going in one direction. Aside from the unmarked, difficult portage and cliff, this was a beautiful adventure with very few boats or cottages. The following places are along Lake Ontario. Sandbanks Provincial Park. In early May, I visited Sandbanks Provincial Park. One water access point was the outlet launch in the park. You can camp here, but I didn't. There are huge hills of sand called dunes that are fragile and look unusual. Long sand dunes mostly blocked the openings of 2 Lake Ontario bays, which are now called West Lake and East Lake. The West Lake Dune Barrier is the longest in the world. When trees were removed, the sand dunes moved around, so willows were planted to stabilize the dunes. Some stunted cedar, pine, and spruce trees also grow there now. The sandy beaches looked beautiful. I saw a ring-billed gull and many other shorebirds on Lake Ontario. Except for a short paddle on the outlet river, wind and waves can be issues. The dunes trail was good, and I saw a painted turtle. This park can get very busy, but it was empty. If you've not seen this place, enjoy it on a calm, off-season day. Presqu'ile Provincial Park. I camped at Presqu'ile Provincial Park on Lake Ontario in early May. Like Sandbanks Provincial Park, it had beautiful beaches. Water access for sheltered paddling was available, at the 162 Harbour Street launch in Brighton, outside of the park, or at Calf Pasture Point in the park. Either gets you access to a wetland area where I saw mute swans and bowfin fish thrashing and swirling around. There were red-winged blackbirds, terns, sparrows, and sandpipers. I saw dogwood, cattails, and grasses. You must stay more than 200 meters away from two offshore islands for most of the paddling season due to waterfowl nesting. In the evening, I saw a pretty lighthouse and lots of wildlife, 2 raccoons, 4 turkeys, and 2 deer. I watched a beautiful sunset over a calm Lake Ontario. A good explore on a calm off-season day. The following places are along the St. Lawrence River. Prescott. I paddled solo from Centennial Park in Prescott on a fall day with low wind. The park looked very nice. I paddled east past Kelly's Beach, where workers were cleaning up, and past an ocean-going ship that was parked. I saw the Riverwalk Park. Much of the shoreline had large rocks to prevent erosion. I saw the Prescott Marina Harbor with its lighthouse and Fort Wellington. I watched various ships pass on the American side of the St. Lawrence with no issues, but one Canadian ship was quite close to the Prescott shoreline. I tucked into the harbor to see how large the waves would be. The waves were more than 4 feet high. I turned around and I headed back without exploring further. As a solo paddler, I was taking no chances. I ate my lunch at Centennial Park. Kayaks would do better with the potential waves in this location. The St. Lawrence River, Long Sault Parkway, and paddling west. 2 of us met and paid our fee at the McLaren Campground, part of the St. Lawrence Parks. We parked at the Hoople Island boat launch. We expected a nice day with very little wind. We paddled west inside the Long Sault Parkway Islands. We paddled past campgrounds, picnic spots, and beaches. The islands were pretty and provided shelter from passing ships. Most places were not crowded in the summer, except a few beaches where people were swimming. We saw a heron and an eagle. We got as far as the Upper Canada Village parking area, where we got out to read the 1812 memorial at Chrysler's farm and have lunch. We shared our bubbles with a toddler. There is a fee to visit Upper Canada Village. On our return trip, we paddled outside of the islands where the current and the wind helped us along. There was no shelter from waves of ships, but they were a long way away. We saw ships, motorboats, and sea-doos. This is a highly recommended paddle of about 32 kilometers for a very calm day. If you wanted, you could stay within the shelter of the Long Sault Islands. The St. Lawrence River, Long Sault Parkway, and heading east. We visited the Lost Villages Museum and learned the history of this area. The St. Lawrence River water level was raised to flood downstream rapids, allowing large ships to go from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean through a series of huge locks. Some houses were moved and others were burned. Trees were cut down, and Highway 2 was moved inland. The project flooded many small villages in 1958. On a very calm day in August, I launched from Quindon Park, east of the Long Sault Parkway and west of Cornwall. I was able to locate several places where Highway 2 went underwater and then reappeared above water. At one time, this all would have been above the waterline. I saw other roads under the water and stumps that had once been trees. I paddled past Avonmore Beach, which is another possible water access point. I saw a large barge and a yacht club, and then arrived at the Long Sault Parkway, where I turned around. I saw lots of fish, Canada geese, ducks, herons, cormorants, and an eagle. I saw willows and Queen Anne's lace. I paddled about 12 kilometers, but you could go further inside of the Long Sault Parkway Islands to Hoople Island or beyond if you wanted to. A highly recommended paddle on a very calm day. The following places are part of the Madawaska River system: Long Schooner Lake and Round Schooner Lake. The back roads to get here are less than ideal. There is a 3-kilometer hike near the access point, but we did not do it. Two of us paddled Long Schooner Lake and went carefully through the narrow channel and into Round Schooner Lake. We set up our tent on Round Schooner and then paddled into Mackey Creek. We saw a beaver lodge and something bouncy and black that was likely a bear. After about 1 kilometer, a lot of grass was blocking our path, and there were many insects from recent rain. We turned around without getting to Centennial Lake, though it can sometimes be done. These are small lakes, so we explored all of Round Schooner and saw lots of loons and their babies, mergansers, and fish. The next day we did a backcountry hike. There is very good scenery and swimming. In all, we covered about 15 kilometers. This is highly recommended, as long as you don't mind the roads. Centennial Lake. This was posted as a group trip, but no participants signed up. Two of us arrived early at the launch, where Centennial Lake Road, or County Road 65, goes over Centennial Lake. It was fall, and we had to wait until 10 a.m. for the fog to clear. We stopped again in Wilson Bay because we couldn't see well. We got to Big Island, and we circled it clockwise. We investigated several good Crown Land campsites. One of them was occupied. There was good swimming, but it was too late in the season. The fall colors were beautiful. We paddled about 17 kilometers. You could paddle as far as you like here. This was a highly recommended, enjoyable outing on a calm day. Blackdonald Lake. Our group trip was altered due to high winds, so just two of us launched from the Blackdonald Tent and Trailer Park mid-August. We paddled about 6 kilometers south on the eastern side of Blackdonald Lake before turning around and paddling east towards the Mountain Chute Dam and Frank's Campground. In the area that locals call Meadows Bay, we found several Crown Land campsites. Punster went for a swim at one, and we ate lunch at another. There were a lot of mosquitoes. We saw several great blue herons, but not much other wildlife. Frank's Campground was mostly trailers. Several times we had crossed long stretches of open water, so we were happy that the wind stayed low. The lake had cottages near our launch, but much of it appeared to be unoccupied. Motorboats did not cause us any issues. We paddled about 23 kilometers during 6 hours. You could paddle as far as you like here. There are other access points if you want to see other parts of the lake. This lake is highly recommended on a calm day. Burnstown North to the Stewartville Dam. In the fall, we launched from Burnstown Beach. We headed left towards the Stewartville Dam. The water level was low and there was little current. We saw a young eagle and a large beaver. We crossed to the other side of the river a bit above the dam. We returned to a very quiet and beautiful Burnstown Beach for lunch, before paddling on to the Springtown Bridge area. From the beach to the dam is about 5 kilometers each way. It's a good paddle as long as you can handle the current, which fluctuates. The following places are part of the Mississippi River system. Bon Echo Provincial Park on Mazenau Lake. 3 of us paddled Upper Mazenau Lake near Bon Echo Provincial Park mid-July. We launched from North Beach, but there are several launch options. Mazenau Rock is about 100 meters high and has about 260 pictographs. It was easy to see the pictographs just above the water level. Indigenous people considered this place to be powerful and sacred. The lake was large and deep. In just a bit of wind, our canoe went airborne on the waves. We did not paddle as far as we had planned. We did not hike the trail above Mazenau Rock, though we had heard it was good. We camped overnight. Early in the morning, with low wind anticipated and no crowds, We explored again before having breakfast at the Narrows. We paddled north along the western shore of Upper Mazenod Lake, past the public Tappings Bay boat launch. On our return, we stopped for a swim. This is a highly recommended paddle on a calm day. The Mazenod-Kishkaboose loop was closed when we were there, but we've heard that it is good. We'll have to go another year. Dalhousie Lake and the Mississippi River. Captain Peacock and I launched from Sylvania Lodge on Dalhousie Lake and paddled clockwise around Dalhousie Lake. Our canoe, named Mr. Mustard, had comfortable seat cushions. The lake had cottages on about 2/3 of the shoreline. We saw many freshwater clams at the bottom of the lake. We stopped at the nice Centennial Park boat launch on the west side. This might be a good picnic stop. Just north of the park was High Falls, where the Mississippi River flows into the lake. It was the location of a dispute between two lumber barons in the 1880s. McLaren built a log slide at this location and refused to allow Caldwell to use it for his lumber. The dispute went all the way to England, where the Ontario River and Streams Act was upheld. It stated that Canadian waterways could not be blocked by private interests. It also led to the navigable waterways being open to all. A little farther along the west side was a nice public beach. We spotted a float plane and an old campground on the north side of the lake. A pigeon tried to dive bomb us until we left. We had also seen a heron, a swallow, loons, turkey vultures, and red-winged blackbirds. We paddled back to Sylvania Lodge and 5 kilometers down the Mississippi River before turning around. The river was more scenic and had more wildlife than the lake. There were loons, herons, mallard ducks, a turtle, a beaver, and many birds on the river. Captain Peacock thought he saw yellow-bellied sapsuckers. It was a good paddle of 25 kilometers in all. We'll explore farther into McCulloch's Mud Lake and go farther down the Mississippi to the rapids another time. Sharbot Lake and Black Lake. We visited the Sharbot Lake area several times and we found it beautiful. Access to the boat launch in the town of Sharbot Lake and access at the Provincial Park both worked. We camped on the water at the Provincial Park. The campsites are on the smaller Black Lake, but there is a good short portage between the two lakes. Sharbot Lake is very large, with some cottages. We paddled around the west side of the lake. Several herons were spotted. There could be lots of motorboats on summer weekends, but they didn't cause us issues. We stopped for a swim at the beautiful town public beach. We went under the Highway 38 bridge and paddled a small section of the east side of the lake. All of Sharbot Lake was very scenic. We paddled about 24 kilometers on our longest trip. We also walked the Discovery Trail in the Provincial Park, which has good views of the water. On one of our trips, we learned to always take our full first aid kit. If you don't, you are sure to need it. Our group got 2 bee stings while we were visiting the campground. This area is highly recommended. Bennett Lake. We paddled Bennett Lake northwest of Perth twice. Once we headed north from Ennis Cottages and once we headed south. The narrow lake has relatively few cottages. On the northern trip, we found a wetland area and saw herons, one eating a fish, water lilies, cattails, and other tall grasses. There is a dam and rapids in this direction, but we didn't reach them. The southern section looked better for swimming, and it was paddled in a clockwise direction to the end of Fagan Lake and back. Here we saw herons, hawks, loons, an eagle, Canada geese, mallard ducks and other types of ducks, a deer, a muskrat, and beaver lodges. We did not find black tern nests, which are rare but can sometimes be found here. There were lots of fish, including bass. There were some large rock walls. A float plane came very close to landing where we were paddling, but then it continued flying. It later landed several more times nearby. We decided that paddling near shore was wise. We liked the south end of Bennett Lake and into Fagan Lake best. We paddled a total of about 30 kilometers during 2 trips here. Ice cream can be found in Balderson. It's a good paddling location. The Clyde River at Lanark. We did a short paddle from the town of Lanark upstream on the Clyde River through Kerr Lake and as far as Drummond's Rapids. Access is from Clyde River Park or the Clyde River Public Boat Launch in Lanark. It was late fall, so we watched for ducks and duck hunters. Both had left. All we found were many duck decoys. There were many beaver lodges and lots of large fish. We saw one heron. There were water lilies and other wetland plants in some places. There was very little water at Drummond's Rapids, but that area was the prettiest, with lots of cedar trees. This was a good short paddle. We would do it again, but avoid the fall hunting season. Ferguson Falls area. There is a nice new community hall in Ferguson Falls, with lots of parking and a canoe launch. Watch for wild parsnip growing at the launch. An alternate access point is the McIlquin-Blair Road launch off of Ferguson Falls Road, a little farther south. We paddled from Ferguson Falls south to the Fall River area before turning around. There was a lot of wildlife between Ferguson Falls and the McIlquin launch, including herons, a dozen or more loons, a large snapping turtle and other smaller turtles, 3 adult deer and a fawn, a bear, an otter, mallard ducks, and red-winged blackbirds. The Mississippi River was quite wide and without cottages for most of our paddle, but less scenic than near Dalhousie Lake. We found clam shells at the McIlquin launch. A local explained that otters and muskrats eat the freshwater clams. We paddled about 28 kilometers. This paddle is highly recommended to see the wildlife. Robertson Lake. We paddled near the South Lavant Community Center in early May. There is a dock, outhouse, and a nice large beach area. We enjoyed paddling clockwise 8 kilometers around this small lake. Some of the lake had homes or cottages. There were some unoccupied islands. The west side of the lake had a pretty bay. We saw several loons, a beaver, Canada geese, and mallard ducks. Look for bass spawning beds at the end of the lake. This was a good short paddle if you do not mind the drive. We would go again. Clayton Lake. We parked at the Clayton Dam and paddled clockwise around Clayton Lake. We saw herons, Canada geese, and goslings, lots of loons, an otter, turtles, ducks, water lilies, and cattails. There were a few homes or cottages on the lake, but most of the lake does not have them. There are 2 private campgrounds, Clayton Lakeside and Black Rock Park. We paddled under the Galbraith Bridge and into Indian River. It was mostly blocked with vegetation, so we didn't get very far. The island near the Galbraith Bridge, which in the past has been used as a picnic stop, was covered in goose poop and not recommended. The nice park beside the Clayton Dam makes a much better lunch stop. It had a picnic table and an outhouse. The lake is shallow and was created when the Clayton Dam was built. Watch for stumps. There's nothing wrong with this paddle. The Clayton launch has limited parking. Taylor Lake. When paddling Clayton Lake, a channel leads to Taylor Lake. Taylor has marsh shorelines with lots of cattails, water lilies, and other vegetation growing in places. It had a launch at the end of 12th Concession on the east side of the lake and another on the west side on Floating Bridge Road. Between 12th Concession and Floating Bridge Road, there used to be a floating bridge. It was destroyed by a hurricane, but you can look on the bottom to see if you see logs from it. Marsh covers much of this lake. Watch for stumps. We paddled about 24 kilometers total around both Clayton and Taylor Lakes. Appleton Almont. We've paddled this area several times from very early spring to fall. Sometimes we launched from Appleton Bay Park and sometimes from the Almont Fairgrounds. Either way, paddle to the right from the launch. The water flows from Appleton to Almont. We usually saw an eagle. We've watched baby 8-inch beavers chewing on popsicle-sized sticks that were unafraid of people. We've seen huge trees and smaller trees that were eaten by beavers. Several times we saw a trumpeter swan. Once we saw a pair of what looked like albino Canada geese, as well as many other Canada geese. Herons, loons, and painted turtles were spotted. Appleton had pretty waterfalls at the dam. The forests were flooded each spring. It was about 20 kilometers to do a return trip. It is highly recommended after spring flooding. You can paddle here later in the year as well. Beware of strong currents and the Almont Bridge, which leads to a waterfall. Almont downstream. We launched from the Metcalfe Geoheritage Park in Almont and were careful about currents from the Almont Dam. We paddled downstream past the historic Mississippi Valley Textile Mill and several pretty waterfalls. We saw a heron, a beaver lodge, and lots of cedar trees. We heard some unusual bird songs. About 2 kilometers downstream, we came to rapids where we turned around. At some water levels, if the rapids permit, it might be possible to continue to Blakeney. There was nothing wrong with this short paddle. Blakeney, upstream. We parked at Blakeney Rapids Park, a good place for a picnic. We launched our canoes across the road above the rapids. We paddled upstream and to the right. We turned right again into Indian River, where we explored to rapids. Back on the Mississippi River, we continued south as far as rapids and turned around to go back to Blakeney. It is about 3 kilometers from Blakeney to the rapids. We saw herons, cardinal flowers, swamp milkweed, cattails, and lots of cedar trees. We did not see many cottages or homes on the route. At some water levels, if the rapids permit, it may be possible to continue to Almont. This is a pretty and short paddle. There was nothing wrong with it. Use caution near Blakeney Rapids. Pakenham to Highway 17. 2 of us launched into the Mississippi River from Huntline Road just off of Highway 17. We paddled to the left about 8 kilometers to the Pakenham 5-span Stone Bridge Park on the west side. Along the way we saw cows in the water, lots of turtles on logs, a beaver and a beaver lodge, ducks, red-winged blackbirds, an oriole, a cardinal, and an eagle. There were cedar, maple, and willow trees and water lilies. We saw the largest cattails we had seen anywhere. Farmers' fields had corn on both sides of the river. We didn't spot fossils in the rocks along the river, but others have. We avoided currents near the Pakenham Bridge Rapids. We ate lunch in Pakenham and turned back to the Huntline launch and went beyond it. It was about a 16-kilometer paddle. This was not the trip that we had planned. Our Algonquin Highlands Big East trip had been cancelled because of a tornado warning. Sometimes plans need to change. There was nothing wrong with this paddle. The following places are part of the Ottawa River system. A few years back, I was told to avoid the Ottawa River because of wind, waves, and current. I didn't listen. I paddle the Ottawa River only on calm days. The Ottawa River from Bissett Creek to Stonecliff. Late August, we launched into Bissett Creek from under an old railway bridge. The access was marked on the highway, and it required a steep climb down some large rocks. You could also do a longer paddle and begin in Deux Rivières at the public launch. We saw bear droppings in the area. We went left out into a very calm Bissett Bay. There were a few cottages near the Bissett Bay launch, but mostly the area was remote. We saw Rocher Capitan Island on our left, followed by a smaller island. We saw Marabou Point with a sturdy navigational marker that sticks out into the Ottawa River. The wind picked up and we had whitecaps, so we didn't explore Grant's Creek. There was an old railway track, now a hiking trail, near the shoreline in many places. When the wind died down, we paddled past Pitchett Bay. The section between Pitchett Bay and Stonecliff was the prettiest. We paddled through many tiny islands there. We saw 5 loons and a turtle on a log. We saw pine, spruce, and birch trees, amongst others. There were logs stuck in the Ottawa River. We saw a few houses near the Stonecliff launch. We had only seen 1 motorboat, 1 kayaker, and a few cottages or homes all day. We had paddled about 22 kilometers, following the shoreline in one direction. We found our shuttle car in Stonecliff and headed to Des Moines Valley Guides, where we were staying in a comfortable cabin. This was a good adventure, but not as pretty as the Deep River area. The Des Moines River Flatwater and the Tote Road Trail. We were ready to launch from Stonecliff at 8 in the morning, but were delayed by fog. When it was clear, we paddled 1 kilometer directly across the Ottawa River and followed the shoreline 3 kilometers east. We found the Des Moines Trail dock and explored campsite 24. We paddled 5 kilometers up the beautiful Des Moines River in calm, sunny conditions. We found campsite 21 below Ryan's Chute on our left or river right, and we took our canoe out of the water. We hiked 4.5 kilometers north on the Tote Road Trail. There were good views at Ryan's Chute and at Trois Roches. The trail heading to the Fil-de-Grande campsite was well marked with pink tape, but it had not been cleared as much as the main trail. We found the Fil-de-Grande campsite, which viewed Bald Eagle Cliff. We had a pleasant lunch before turning around. The trail was easy to follow, but you had to get over fallen logs or cross streams on rocks. You need to be in good physical shape. There were relics from when it was used to supply logging camps more than 100 years ago. Suitable campsites were at regular intervals, and we found them empty in early fall. We returned to the mouth of the Des Moines River, where Des Moines Valley Guides picked us up with a shuttle. On calm days, you could paddle to Stonecliff or to Driftwood. We had paddled about 14 kilometers and hiked 9 kilometers. This is a remote backcountry area with bear, moose, and no easy evacuation route. This was an exceptional canoe trip if you have the appropriate skills. Thanks to Friends of Des Moines, volunteers, and others for building and maintaining the Tote Road Trail. If you visit, keep the area in good condition. The Des Moines River, Whitewater. Caution, this is not a flatwater canoe trip. We took a shuttle van from Des Moines Valley Guides to Grand Chute, about 26 kilometers up the Des Moines River. We launched from Robertson Lake. I paddled tandem with an experienced guide because I only had basic whitewater training. We practiced our skills so we would be ready for the rapids. There were opportunities to scout the rapids before we paddled them. We kept our canoe upright and free of water. More than 60 people celebrated the opening of the Des Moines Trail that day. We took a right turn to paddle upstream on the Fil-de-Grande River. We stopped at a place called Bertrand's for lunch, and we heard some local history. It's another campsite. We paddled and portaged to the mouth of the Des Moines River, where several shuttle drivers with pontoon boats took us to Driftwood Provincial Park. Some of us continued to Des Moines Valley Guides, and we arrived at our cabin in time for supper. If you have appropriate skills, this is an exceptional canoe trip. The Ottawa River from Swisha to Deep River. 4 of us launched early from Swisha to water below the dam. We paddled on the Quebec side of the Ottawa River and into Boom Creek until it was blocked by tree branches. We continued on the Ottawa River as far as Fraser Landing. A few of the leaves were turning red and orange. Dark clouds were gathering, so we crossed to the Ontario side and paddled towards Point Alexander. We saw a large otter, loons, and a fox. The shoreline had several long sandy points with beaches sticking out into the river. We stopped for lunch on beautiful Burke's Beach. We went as far as the Deep River Marina, where we had a shuttle car. We did not see too much wildlife, but the scenery was outstanding. We paddled 24 kilometers. This was an exceptional one-way paddle on a calm day. The Ottawa River from Arnprior to Sandpoint and beyond. This was a solo trip from Robert Simpson Park in Arnprior to Braeside and beyond on a calm day. There was poison ivy where I launched at the beautiful Robert Simpson Park. I paddled west. In the Braeside area, there were many places to stop. Past the Red Pine launch, there was a beach, but it was cool for swimming. I saw turtles, seagulls, Canada geese, and other birds. Old chains and other relics were visible along the shoreline. Many locals stopped to chat, probably because I paddled solo. I turned around for a short 10-kilometer trip. One could paddle farther to Sandpoint Lighthouse or beyond, and I did later. A hiking trail runs near much of the shoreline. After I returned home, Linda sent me this beautiful photo. Thank you, Linda. This was a good paddling location. Constance Lake. It was late April with high water levels. 3 of us hoped to paddle from Constance Lake to the town of Constance Bay, but after consulting locals at Constance Lake Lodge, we decided we were unlikely to succeed. We would need to portage and drag through bulrush dams, and it would only work when the water was very high. We paddled around Constance Lake from the free launch at 870 Barry Side Road. There were marshy parts, and we found cattails, loons, beavers, mallard ducks, cormorants, red-winged blackbirds, mergansers, and Canada geese. Birders were watching large gliding birds, but we could not identify them. There was a nest on a man-made pole, similar to osprey or eagle nests we had seen before. Constance Creek. 3 of us drove to Vance's Side Road and parked where the road goes over Constance Creek. We had good maps and a GPS. Without them, our route would have been unclear. At one point, a beaver dam blocked our access, but we portaged over it. About halfway down the creek, it looked like we were in a flooded forest with water in all directions. There was no noticeable current and we didn't know which way to go. Punster identified the golf course, and we headed past it to an open channel downstream to town. We met a friendly crowd of people floating in the flooded forest. We saw herons, beavers and their babies, loons, red-winged blackbirds, mallard ducks, and many map turtles. We thought we saw an eagle. On one of our trips, the houses of Constance Bay were flooded, and many sandbags were in use. Water levels vary greatly. There is abundant wildlife in this area. Watch for poison ivy. The distance from Vance's Side Road to town was about 8 kilometers. Sometimes we paddled both directions, but other times we used a shuttle. This trip is highly recommended. Be prepared if the water is cold. Eelmore. From Constance Bay, we paddled past beautiful sandy beaches and Buckham's Bay to the old Camp Woolsey, now Camp Capital. We paddled 500 meters across the Ottawa River to Eelmore. We were able to paddle through the middle of the island, where it is quite scenic. We ate our lunches on the beach. It was an excellent swimming spot, but the water was cool in late September. We returned the way we had come, but with a strong headwind. We saw blue jays, crows, Canada geese, many other birds, fish jumping out of the Ottawa River, frogs, beaver lodges, freshwater clams, and a deer. You could have issues with motorboats, wind, and waves, but otherwise, this was a good paddling location. The Ottawa River at Dunrobin. We paddled between Dunrobin and Constance Bay many times. The Port of Call Marina at the end of Vance's Side Road offers water access for a fee. Sometimes we paddled east to see Piney's Point and Sheila McGee Park, both very nice. On one of the trips, we took two teddies along to test out their new personal flotation devices. As usual, they made friends with the children they met, and quite a few parents, too. On other trips, we paddled west as far as Constance Bay. In a thunderstorm, we found shelter on a deserted beach. Several of us tried a 24-kilometer solo trip here twice. Using a heavy paddle was exhausting, but when it was replaced with a light paddle, it seemed easy. Lesson learned. A good trip on a calm day. Lac Leamy. We paddled Lac Leamy several times. The lake is small, but it is connected to the Gatineau River and the Ottawa River, so you can paddle as far as you like. Access is near the Lac Leamy boat rentals on the northwest side. We paddled under a bridge to find the casino and a large fountain. We paddled south on the Gatineau River and west on the Ottawa River and saw the Jean Richard shipwreck. There were many small inlets to explore. We ate our lunches where we could see Rideau Falls. We went west as far as the Museum of Civilization and east as far as the refurbished Ottawa River House for a swim. Watch for poison ivy along the Ottawa River. This was a good paddle. Parc Plaisance to the chutes. Coca-Cola and Punster came along. We paid our fee and launched from the Parc Plaisance Visitor Center into Petite Nation River. Watch for poison ivy. We paddled to the right and upstream. There were lots of herons. A baby beaver slapped its tail at us and then disappeared. The water was brown, not clear. Below the chutes, we found a landing on the east side with many other boats. We walked up a hill to find an excellent picnic area with a good view of the chutes and some historical information. We returned the way we had come, a total distance of 12 kilometers. The best part was at the chutes. Another time we camped at Parc Plaisance and paddled the Ottawa River. You could paddle as far as you like. This was a good trip after mid-May. The chutes are largest early in the year. Voyageur Provincial Park. In early fall, I paddled east and solo from the township of East Hawkesbury Park Launch to Voyageur Provincial Park. I was told there was nothing special here. Wrong. I passed a very nice Chute à Blondeau park and another launch. Several times fish jumped out of the river and landed with a splash. I saw a beaver lodge. I spotted 9 eagles in the area. Some were bald eagles with the usual white head and tail. Others were similar in size, shape, and flight, but they were brown and missing the white head and tail. I believe they were juvenile eagles. 2 of them were the largest birds I'd ever seen. I thought maybe Sesame Street's Big Bird was based on a real bird. A birder was also watching carefully without access to a canoe. I felt privileged. Staff told me eagles and juvenile eagles migrate through this time of year. I explored all around the park by canoe. I saw the Carillon Dam, which raised the level of the water in this area. There were fewer invasive water chestnut plants than a few years ago. It was about 10 kilometers one way, but you can explore farther. It's a good trip. The following places are on the South Nation River system. This river was never crowded. The water was generally brown, not clear, which meant sometimes we'd hit something we couldn't see. The South Nation River from Spencerville. We had heard that Spencerville was a good place to paddle the South Nation River. There was not enough water to paddle downstream in early June, so we went upstream from the old mill. Typical of paddling the South Nation River, a heron led our way. We saw lots of wildlife, including herons, both blue and green, a muskrat, lots of beaver activity, red-winged blackbirds, a warbler, an oriole, woodpeckers and other birds, purple irises, white and yellow water lilies, many white nannyberry flowers on bushes, cattails, and dogwood bushes with white flowers. There was a 12-inch snapping turtle lying still in the water. It was very scenic. We saw the Weir Road Bridge and another bridge for cars that we carefully had to duck under. Past County Road 18, we were stopped by fallen trees. very near the new Mill Run Conservation Area. In the future, this conservation area will be a good accessible picnic spot. In 2023, it was unmarked and on your right when going upstream. We returned the way we had come. We had seen no other boats. It's a highly recommended 20-kilometer return trip in late May or early June. High water levels are required. The South Nation River from Cass Bridge Conservation Area upstream to Oak Valley Pioneer Park. 6 paddlers set out to paddle west from Cass Bridge Conservation Area in July. There was a nice dock, washroom, and shelter. There was wild parsnip near the launch to avoid. We paddled to the right, going upstream, and we were unsure if there would be enough water to go far. There was little current or wind. As usual, herons flew ahead of us, showing us the way. My paddling partner identified the various plants and animals. Mallard ducks, muskrat, swamp milkweed. Suddenly I heard, "Stop! That shouldn't be here." A water chestnut plant was removed. It is harmful to other plants and not normal in this river. Our group found and removed many water chestnut plants until we realized there were too many of them. Where there was a V in the river, the south branch entered on the left. We took the right fork. After we went under the Kirkwood Road Bridge, we watched for steep riverbanks and pine trees on our right, indicating the Oak Valley Pioneer Park. We found them just before the river became impassable. We had paddled 7 kilometers. With great effort, we climbed the 10-foot bank. When staff there heard about the water chestnut plants, they wanted to see them, but they were back in our canoes. Fortunately, one of the canoes had samples that did not require us to scale the bank again. Staff said the river goes to the top of the banks each spring. We enjoyed our lunch, then turned around and followed 2 great blue herons back. We saw no other boats all day. This was a good 14-kilometer paddle. The South Nation River from Chesterville to Cass Bridge. After advice from a Chesterville employee who had paddled as far as South Mountain the previous year, 3 of us departed from the Veterans Memorial Park boat launch in Chesterville and headed to the right, upstream. Once again, we saw lots of herons and some turtles lined up on a log. We went past some farmers' fields. We went under a bridge after about 7 kilometers and reached the Cass Bridge Conservation Area dock after 11 kilometers. We ate lunch under the shelter and watched several kayaks go paddling. We avoided the wild parsnip growing. We turned around and sailed back to Chesterville nicely with stern-heavy canoes and a tailwind. We went 24 kilometers. There was nothing wrong with this trip. The South Nation River from Chrysler to Castleman. We found the St. Albert Conservation Area launch at the north end of Maccabee Street in the town of St. Albert. It is not at the south end of Maccabee Street where Google may direct you. We paddled upstream and left to Chrysler and found some rapids and a general lack of water in Chrysler. We turned around and paddled past St. Albert again. We saw where the Castor River entered the South Nation River from the west. We saw a few motorboats fishing, some farmers' fields, and a few birds, but not much wildlife. We continued downstream to High Falls Conservation Area in Castleman, where we had left a shuttle vehicle. We had paddled about 14 kilometers. There is nothing wrong with this paddle. Castor River from Embrun to Castleman. We did this trip several times. The Castor River runs into the South Nation River a bit before Castleman. It was possible to start at either the Russell Boat Launch near Embrun or at the High Falls Conservation Area in Castleman. Both have space for a lunch stop and picnic tables. The distance between them was 14 kilometers. The water flows from Embrun to Castleman, and a wind from the west would also favor this direction. A return trip was 28 kilometers, so some people might want to go one way and use a shuttle. During a trip in the fall, we saw Canada geese flying in all directions and definitely not south. We also saw a goose that couldn't fly and a dead goose. We saw oak trees that were the last to lose their leaves, and a few tamarack trees with yellow needles falling off. In usual South Nation fashion, a heron led us along our route in both directions. One bald eagle was spotted near Embrun. There were ducks, a beaver, and a few beaver lodges. Mostly we saw farmers' fields, a few houses, and a few people fishing. There was nothing wrong with this trip. The South Nation River at Jessops Falls Conservation Area. We paddled between the Wendover boat launch and Plantagenet, but decided that the best launching spot was at Jessops Falls Conservation Area. It was cold, cloudy, and windy with a bit of rain in late October. We had the usual cold water gear. We paddled east from Wendover about 2 kilometers and found our way through grasses to the South Nation River. We paddled upstream on the South Nation River past a campground, a marina, homes, and old bridge pilings to Jessops Falls Conservation Area. When the Carillon Dam was built on the Ottawa River, the water level here was raised and Jessops Falls disappeared underwater. Jessops Falls Conservation Area is a long, narrow, good-looking area along the river. Like the rest of the South Nation River, the water is brown, and you can't see what you might hit. Near Jessops Falls, our canoe got stuck on top of a rock. We gently rocked our canoe until we were off of the rock. We paddled as far as the rapids in Plantagenet and stopped at the park. There is poison ivy in the area. We saw hundreds of Canada geese and mallard ducks migrating south. We saw a few beaver lodges and trees that had been eaten by beavers. A few fish jumped out of the water. There was nothing wrong with this 26-kilometer trip. The following places are in Algonquin Park. Crotch Lake, Algonquin. We did a week-long camping trip beginning on Crotch Lake in Algonquin Park and then moving to Booth Lake. This trip had duck weather and was an endurance test. It rained almost the whole week, which would explain why the photos look foggy. Crotch Lake in Algonquin is easily accessible from the Shell Lake access point. It is a good location to learn about canoe tripping. The lake has many beautiful campsites with sandy beaches. There was a fire ban on when we arrived, and our less than perfect communication meant that we did not know it was officially lifted, but we guessed. This was a good trip location. Booth Lake, Algonquin. After our trip on Crotch Lake, we packed up and took some heavy items to our car at the Shell Lake access point. We paddled and did 2 portages to reach Booth Lake. We've been here several times. We found a reasonable campsite with a sandy beach, and it rained some more. On other trips here, we explored the marsh at McCarthy Creek, where 2 otters did not want to be photographed, and we did the short hike to Chipmunk Lake. In good weather, expect swimming and sunsets. Highly recommended. Grand Lake, Algonquin Park. We took many trips to Grand Lake and the neighboring Stratton Lake, Eastern Pines Trail, and High Falls Waterslide. We camped at both backcountry sites and the Acre campground. Highlights were the large sandy beaches, sunsets, campfires, white and red pines, a wolf spotted on Carcajou Bay very late in the fall, and almost colliding with a swimming bear. At the end of October, paddling solo, a fellow paddler crossed the middle of a windy Grand Lake. I did not take that risk, and I followed the shoreline as much as possible. Ahead I saw what looked like a beaver, but later I saw it was a swimming bear. I stopped to avoid a collision before altering course back to my campsite. The bear sniffed the air and looked at me before swimming away. I was not thinking about photos at the time. I've watched several rescue planes on this lake and was present when a wildfire started. I've endured the worst of the black flies and lived. The car has been regularly eaten by a chipmunk here. The roads can also be a problem each spring. The campground can get busy in the summer, but despite all of this, the location was exceptionally good. Stratton Lake and High Falls, Algonquin Park. Access to Stratton Lake is via Grand Lake and requires one very short portage. We previously camped on Stratton Lake, visited the water slide at the east end of Stratton Lake, and walked the Eastern Pines trails. Be prepared for bear in the area. It is highly recommended. Sec Lake, Algonquin. When I was smoked out of Grand Lake, I took a solo day trip to Sec Lake, where the air was clearer, at least early in the day. This lake is a bit over 2 kilometers long, with nice large campsites, a large rock face, and 3 islands. The small island was the prettiest. The other 2 islands have campsites. There are some nice beaches. I'd paddle here again when there is less smoke. Rock Lake, Algonquin. We took many trips to Rock Lake and the nearby Booth's Rock Trail, Madawaska River, and Whitefish Lake. The lake was a good size for exploring, but winds can come up quickly. We saw many large rock faces on the lake, which explain the name Rock Lake. The rock cliffs on the west side have pictographs, but we couldn't see them. We saw loons, herons, beavers, ducks, and a few times a bear. The sunsets and fall colors were excellent. There were 2 campgrounds and backcountry campsites. Booth's Rock Trail had an excellent view of the lake from the top. The nearby Big Pines Trail and Lookout Trail were enjoyed. This was an exceptional location for paddling. Whitefish Lake, Algonquin. This lake has a few backcountry campsites and a group campground. Each time we paddled Whitefish Lake, we were curtailed by strong winds. So far, we've only seen half of the lake. It had some huge scenic cliffs on the east side, the Centennial hiking trail, and some natural beaches. This was a good location. Canoe Lake, Algonquin. We started at the Canoe Lake permit office and a huge sandy beach. There were quite a few cottages, and in the summer this lake is very busy. We paddled clockwise around the lake in early October, about 12 kilometers. The leaves were so bright red that it was difficult to believe that they were real. We stopped to see Tom Thompson's cairn. He died here in 1917. We saw Camp Amick for boys. There were several sets of loons. We watched an adult and a young loon playing a diving game. Many backcountry trips begin here and lead to other parts of the park. This lake does not have campsites, but you can camp on other nearby lakes or at the T Lake campground. This was a good trip. Go when it is not crowded. The following place is in the Algonquin Highlands. Oxtong River and Lake. We launched our canoe from the Ragged Falls picnic area on Highway 60. We paddled a few kilometers upstream to Ragged Falls. The scenery on the Oxtong River is very good here. On the right side or river left, there was a nice place to land below the falls, and there's a portage trail to walk up and see the top of the falls. We explored all the trails. The falls are very impressive in May, but still worth a visit in September. We returned to the canoe and paddled downstream on the Oxtong River, past the picnic area to Oxtong Lake. The lake was calm, with many resorts and homes. We went under Highway 60 as far as the Algonquin Outfitters store. We turned around and paddled back. The total distance paddled was about 8 kilometers. On a calm day, you could paddle farther on Oxtong Lake. To see more of the Oxtong River requires difficult portaging and whitewater skills. The area is busy on summer weekends, but it is highly recommended. The following places are in Kawartha. Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park, Wolfe Lake, and Crab Lake. 4 of us visited Wolfe Lake and Crab Lake twice, totaling 6 days. Wolfe Lake has some cottages and 2 campsites. We camped on Wolfe and explored both campsites and the whole lake. We enjoyed campfires, sunsets, and swimming. We heard and watched loons. A backup water filter needed to be used. There was a lesson on how to hang food. Crab Lake has many campsites on a small lake and it requires a short portage. We did a day trip to Crab Lake and we did some bass fishing. One day on Wolfe Lake, I had to choose between walking out the fire road or paddling out solo with a 35 kilometer per hour tailwind. The open lake had whitecaps. I chose paddling over walking because I really did not want to carry gear back 4 kilometers along the fire trail. I used all of the precautions I knew and made it out safely, but the conditions were questionable. The canoe was stern heavy and the weight was low in the canoe. I stayed near shore. I braced the canoe and steered but didn't paddle much. Several others had similar difficulties that day. The tandem return to the campsite into the wind was not as difficult, and the rest of the trip went smoothly. This was a good trip location. On one trip, we left as a storm was approaching. Other people were starting their trip. We watched 2 people seated on metal chairs precariously balanced on top of an overloaded blow-up craft. They pulled a second overloaded blow-up craft. Whitecaps and high winds were likely to cause them problems. Some wiser families did not paddle that day. To avoid disaster, always make sure you have sufficient training and appropriate gear for your trip. Always check the weather forecast. Silent Lake Provincial Park. 4 of us spent 3 days at Silent Lake Provincial Park. Silent Lake is about 2.5 kilometers long, and we paddled the whole perimeter. No motorboats are permitted. There were nice benches to sit by the lake and 2 beaches for swimming. We saw a beaver dam, loons, a very large black rat snake sunning itself, and a pretty creek. The park has a lot of hills to climb. There is a 15-kilometer hike around the lake, but we haven't done it yet. There was a beautiful sunset. Most of the campsites are not near the water. Our campsite was near the water, but it was not a good site. We left just before a storm hit, and a river ran where our tent had been. The park is open most of the year. This was a good place for a shorter paddle. The following places are part of the Bonnechere River system. The Bonnechere River from Algonquin Park to Round Lake. On a calm, misty, mid-June day, I parked at Low Garvey and paddled the bay and Beaver Dam Lake solo. I went west through White Mountain Bay, Courier's Lake, and into Couchain Lake. I found several backcountry campsites. I saw no other paddlers or people. The deer flies and horse flies were horrible, so I was covered with insect repellent and a bug jacket. I saw beavers, turtles, and a swimming squirrel. I decided to have some lunch at a backcountry campsite on Couchain Lake. Do you know how hard it is to eat while you're wearing a bug jacket? I heard some splashing and looked to see a moose. It was my reward for paddling solo quietly with the rain and the bugs. I went as far as Stringer Lake and then turned back. This is a highly recommended 22-kilometer scenic paddle with the possibility of seeing wildlife. While camping at Bonnechere Provincial Park, I also paddled from my campsite up to Jack's Chute and the short distance to Round Lake. The scenery was fantastic in this area. 1 year later, I repeated the adventure with a group of 4. There was a bit of wind, and there were no bugs. Bonnechere River from Traymore to Golden Lake. This was a solo trip, beginning from the public launch just east of the Traymore Road Bridge over the Bonnechere River. I paddled to the left and east towards Golden Lake. Siscard's Bay area had the most wildlife and the fewest homes. I saw a deer, 2 loons, and 4 herons. Lots of pickerelweed had pretty purple flowers. I hadn't paddled far when a Ministry of Natural Resources motorboat asked if I was fishing and whether or not I had a license. No and no, so they left and approached others. I went through 2 sets of narrows and into Wilson's Bay, where I could see large cliffs on the east side. There were many homes and cottages. At Griffin's Narrows, I decided to turn around to avoid a storm. I returned to Traymore and packed up minutes before the storm started. I ate lunch and drove to see the Traymore cliffs that I had missed. They were very nice. Next time I paddle here, I'll begin at the Deacon launch and see all of the cliffs from the water. I had paddled about 14 kilometers instead of 20 kilometers if I'd gone to Deacon and back. It was a good paddle, but it was not the backcountry that I expected. The Bonnechere Chutes and Caves. The Bonnechere River also includes the Bonnechere Caves near Douglas, the fourth chute near Douglas, and the second chute near Renfrew. I've only seen these from land. The Bonnechere River, the first chute to the Ottawa River. Two of us launched from the Horton boat launch and paddled south to the first chute of the Bonnechere River. Both the first chute and the Bonnechere River are very pretty here. The trees were starting to turn colors in early fall. There were Canada geese, some turtles on logs, a few cattails, and old pine trees along the river. It was very calm. We paddled north to see the Ottawa River, where it is very wide. We could have paddled a distance on the Ottawa, but we didn't. We turned around. This short scenic paddle had nothing wrong with it. The following places are in Quebec. Lac Philippe. The first week of October, I went to see the fall colors at Lac Philippe on a calm day. I parked at the boat launch. Signs told me to watch for Eurasian milfoil. I paddled 8 kilometers clockwise around the lake. I saw very little wildlife aside from Canada geese and ducks, but the leaves were yellow, orange, and red. There were some large rocks and a few islands. There were very few people, and it was very beautiful. It can get crowded here. It is highly recommended when you can avoid the crowds. The Gatineau River from Wakefield to Cantley. On a very calm July day, with 15 millimeters of rain expected, two of us put our canoe into the Gatineau River at Wakefield. Water levels allowed us to go north to check out the historic Wakefield Covered Bridge. We turned around and paddled south past Farm Point, Four Seaplanes, and Lake Cascade Paddling Club. We continued until we found Traversier de Parc on River Left, near Cantley. The park had a dock, canoe rack, and a sandy beach suitable for swimming. We had a snack before heading back the way we had come. We saw herons, geese, and ducks. We paddled about 34 kilometers in all, and there was very little rain. Wakefield had good ice cream shops. For a shorter paddle, try the alternate access points. There can be rocks, currents, waves, motorboats, and whitewater here, depending on water levels and weather. Ensure you have the skills for the conditions. Cantley has very limited parking. In good conditions, this was a good paddle. The Trent Severn Waterway. Our last locations happened in Ontario and in the year 2024. Earlier that year, the Canadian Canoe Museum opened at a new location in Peterborough. This inspired a visit, by canoe of course. We took day trips on the nearby Trent Severn Waterway system. This canal system runs 386 kilometers between Trenton and Georgian Bay, through many Kawartha lakes. We had heard that you could not launch or exit at some lock stations easily. Fortunately, with research on the Parks Canada website, it was clear what you could and could not do. As a result, we had no difficulties. We had a lock pass and we went through the locks. We did not portage at locks. Some portages are difficult and others are impossible. Each trip went only in one direction and we provided our own shuttles. Our first day trip was from Mitchell Lake Public Boat Launch to the Talbot Lock Station, covering about 18 kilometers. There were many yachts on this route, but they were extremely courteous. One followed behind us along a narrow canal channel for 2 kilometers at our paddling speed of 5 kilometers per hour. We locked through the Kirkfield Lock, the second highest hydraulic lock in the world, with a lift of 15 meters. It sits at the highest point on the Trent Severn Waterway. We traveled the length of Canal Lake, one of many large lakes on the Trent Severn Waterway. We enjoyed the downstream current of the Talbot River. Our second day trip was between the Lakefield Beach and Peterborough, about 23 kilometers. This route had many lock stations and ran along the Otonabee River. We saw beautiful camping spots near some lock stations. We spotted Trent University with many canoes by the water. Another highlight was traveling through the Peterborough lift lock, the highest hydraulic lift lock in the world, dropping almost 20 meters. We explored Little Lake and stopped at the new Canadian Canoe Museum. If you're in the area, it is worth a visit. We liked arriving and departing from the museum by canoe. On our third day trip, we paddled about 20 kilometers south from Peterborough to Wallace Point. We explored various inlets and bays. The highlight was listening to local advice and spotting a flock of egrets. These huge birds resembled herons, except that they were larger and all white. We had not seen them elsewhere. All of the Trent Severn trips were good paddles, and we were glad to have done them. Here is a list of some favorite trip locations. Now it is your turn. Check the additional resources in the YouTube description. Obtain your maps and do your own research. Keep yourself safe. Wear your personal flotation device. I'll see you on the water soon. Thanks to my video editor, Jennifer Hurd, and to those who contributed images and maps. Thanks to those who joined the trips and assisted in many ways.